Morning, everyone. I'm Sean Driver from the National Adult Literacy Agency. I'm delighted that you're here. Thank you for coming along to our webinar about building a culture of plain English in your organization. Thanks to our colleagues in the All Office, the Adult Literacy for Life office, for requesting it and organizing it and bringing you fine folks along. So we had kind of maybe 150, close to 200 people registered, and we have 60 people online. So hopefully more people will join us as the morning progresses. So that's good. So the webinar is gonna be recorded, and then we're gonna put it online for YouTube. So hopefully then you can then share it with your colleagues and your organizations. Yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen, folks, and then we'll get started because we have a busy morning ahead. So can you see my screen, folks? Lovely. Yeah, I'll just say who's here with me. So my colleague Derv is with me. Derv's gonna help us out with organizing everything. It's always great presence to have along. How are you doing this morning, Derv?
Very well. It's Friday.
Very, very good. And we've got Neil, who's a copywriter in the Bank of Ireland. So I'm glad that Neil is here. And we have Maura from the court service. So yeah, thanks for all for coming along, folks. So gonna ease into it. Our topic today is about building a culture of plain English in your organization, and it's about making it practical. I've got some top tips for you, and then we're going to hear from Neil and more about their experiences in their organizations. It's going to be recorded, like I said, so hopefully you can sit with that. Yeah, good stuff. So it's always good, folks, while I'm talking, just to give you a little something to do and to make it interactive. So if you fancy, just say like in the chat box, hi, my name is, Sean. I work in NALA. I do this in the organization. And here's one thing I'd like to learn about building a culture of plain English in my organization. So just if you have a moment, folks, just find the chat box and just put a little bit of introduction about yourself there, because that will help us a lot. So just kind of feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you don't mind. And if you have any tech problems, folks, I mean, if you have any tech problems, the best I can say is maybe to turn off, like go out and come back in. Sometimes that works, or just check your microphone. But Sarah says she can't hear me. Folks, can you just give me a thumbs up you can all hear me. And the attendees, so I know the presenters can hear me. Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. That's very helpful, folks. Thank you so much. So that's good. So just lower your hand now, folks, so I know you're good, 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 good. Okay, thank you. So good stuff. Great, thanks, Suzanne. So yeah, one thing you'd like to learn, folks, that might be nice in the chat box as well after you finish introductions. So we're gonna have a space for questions and answers either during it or at the end. So if something is really relevant, I'll stop and I'll answer it. I'll ask the presenter, or we might keep it to the end if it's about something else. Yeah, what's also nice, folks, for our presenters is to have like an audience to present to. So if you fancy having your camera on, all you have to say is yes to camera, and then we'll find you, and then we'll give you the power to turn your camera on, and that just helps me to see people, how they react to things people are saying. So if you fancy being a part of the audience, like a live audience, feel free to say yes to camera, and we'll give you the power to turn your camera on. It'll take us a minute because it's hard to find people sometimes, but there we go. Yeah, so we talked about the plan, folks, but there it is. I'll talk for a bit up to 10:20, and then we'll hear from Neil in Bank of Ireland, and then we'll hear from Maura in the court service, and then questions and answers, and then we'll finish at 11. Yeah, so good stuff. 15 minutes. So for me, folks, if I can just start talking about the role of a plain English champion. So what I'm going to do is just do a little bit of talk about the role of plain English champion, give you some top tips, talk about some resources to help you, and help you if you want to become a plain English champion. What are some practical things you can do today or starting next week? Yeah. So for me, folks, the role of a plain English champion. Well, it could be anything you want it to be, folks. But for me, there's a couple of very practical ways you can just, spread the message of plain English in your organization. And maybe you've done training with our colleagues in the Adult Literacy for Life office. Maybe you've done training with me. So it's just about like little kind of small steps, building it, making it part of your organization. So like basic ones, just like sharing your knowledge and supporting your team's use plain English guidelines. Well, how do you do that? Well, you share resources such as our checklist, our writing design guidelines, and the National Disability Authorities Toolkit, which I'll show you in more detail. There's a free e-learning course from our friends in Adult Literacy for Life called Let's Talk About Plain Language. It's 90 minutes long, but folks, you can do it. You can recommend your colleagues do it. You could say, oh, let's do it. Let's give ourselves a week to do it. Let's have a chat on Friday at lunchtime about what we learned. So just kind of like building little kind of practical ways and reflections into your work. So that could be just for something very practical. Let's do it together as a team. Then let's have a short meeting and talk about what we learned. A big thing, folks, is to win over senior management because you might be, not the most powerful person in your organization. But if you can, win over senior management, and there's different ways to do that. You can ask Nala to come and give like a lunch and learn to the senior management. You can give us 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. Senior management will be very busy. If you can get them on a 2.5 hour training or a plain English champion training, all the better. So just, there's inputs Nala can do, or you can show the way I think to win over senior managers is just to show here's where we're starting from. Here's something that's maybe very inaccessible and very inaccessible and very difficult. How do we think our readers or our clients are experiencing this? And then show the plain English guidelines, put them into practice, and show that after and see how much better it is. And try to think about culture as a way to bridge that gap in the organization as a whole. So different ways to win over senior management. I'll show you some other trends that are happening across Ireland and Europe that also might help win over senior management in terms of policy. Yeah, and then folks, if you have a bit of backing from senior management, just start small. Start with a project. It could be like updating a key page on a website, developing a plain English guide to a key service, or creating a plain language summary of policies. So if you have, 10 policies, 20 policies, they can be overwhelming. So could you create a plain language summary for your team? And then, once you have the summary, it can that can be like just a foothold on making things, more plain language because, policies can be very, very long and very well written, but very legalistic. So what ways to start is like develop a plain language summary of policies. I was talking to a person who works in an improved housing body, and that's a thing that their project they're doing with all their new policies, having a plain language summary at the start. Yeah. So other things you can do, folks, are just, keep it, top of your mind. Keep it part of your organization's, fabric and culture. So go to webinars on topics like, well, generative AI is a big one that people are talking about, so, there's webinars out there by plain language specialists and by generative AI specialists that can help you. There's trends like the new ISO plain language standards that you should be aware of. So there's webinars and conferences and publications that I'll send you links to that you can keep up to date with. Leading content critiques. So that sounds hard, folks, but it's actually, quite a simple thing to do once you feel empowered, you feel like there's a culture of it in your organization. And that's where you just get together and you just look at a poster or a website or a video or just some piece of work that you're developing and just invite kind of, feedback. And you can do it on Teams, you can do it online, you can do it in person in a function room. And it's just kind of making that formal and informal so that people feel like there's a team spirit there of like, okay, I can rely on my team to give me some honest feedback. So we call it peer review, you call it content critiques, you can call it anything you want, but it's just having a good teamwork in your organization where people can speak honestly about what's not working or what is working. And the plain English technique, folks, are all about putting the needs of your users first. So it's like, okay, we the organization want to say that, but how can we think from our readers? And related to that is you do content critiques with your clients, so if you can get some user testing, some honest reviews from your clients, that can make a big difference. We might talk a little bit later about getting your team on board with an in-house style guide, and how you can develop that and just starting small. Like sometimes you see style guides and they can be, dozens of pages long. But if you just start small with like, top 10 tips and then have like an A to Z and then have before and after examples, it can be a project you can develop over a long time. Once you've, done a couple of different things in terms of plain language, can you write up a case study, getting, people's experiences in the organization, getting their testimonials, how they experience the plain language, hearing from different stakeholders, showing the impact. If you can actually get like a stats, that can be good. Like when we worked with Dunleary Rathdown County Council, we found that when we updated or we helped them update and plain English their tenant manuals, there was actually an increase or was it a decrease? I think it was an increase in people requesting um, uh, maintenance requests because they was clear about what was their responsibility and what was the tenant's responsibility and what was the council's responsibility. And when there was more clarity, it led to just greater efficiencies because people actually knew what they could request. Yeah, so I think more people were requesting actually. The council did, like, I think it was to paint their houses, something like that. It was a really good example. Another one, folks, is to like just celebrate progress of your teams. So when your team do a like an effective web page or when they publish something, just give people credits, share the kudos. So celebrate progress. That's something we get to do. And then, there's lots of networks out there, folks. And in NALA, we created this Plain English network on LinkedIn, and we've about 668 members. So yeah, it's been growing over a couple of years. And the idea, folks, is just like to get people talking about plain language, what's working in their organization, and I think trends they see. And then I just pop in things that are happening. So like telling people about the new EU rules on digital accessibility. There was a post there. I was talking about that. I came across a webinar about using Gen AI from, trusted colleagues. I think it was in Australia. So I popped that in there with some reflections. So, if you want to keep on top of things, join the Plain English Network, and yeah, it's just like the Irish kind of plain language movement, or one of the places anyway where you can join. And it's good to network and learn about more events like this. Yeah, okay. So recent developments, folks. So like if you're winning over senior management, good things to point to are just how there's more and more uh, just kind of solid basis from established authorities about plain language. And the ones that I kind of point to are like, so the International Office for Standards, the ISO, they have published in recent years, 2023 and 2025, the part one, which is the governing principles of plain language, and part two, which is about legal communication. And there's other ones coming down the line about health communication, about science communication, financial communication. So it's good to have them as kind of a solid authority. And you have to buy them, but there's lots of webinars out there, folks, and lots of resources kind of talking about them, which I'll share links to after the session. And for me, folks, like the standards are really well written and they give practical examples, but they have this kind of magic acronym. So the magic acronym for me, folks, it's about thinking about your pets or your cat or your dog, and think about fur. So when we're thinking about plain language, we're thinking about fur. So we're making information easy to find. So if you look at something, you can actually find the information very quickly. When you can find it, you can understand it. So it's intelligible. It's got short sentences. It's got key terms explained. So it's you can understand it. And then when you can understand it, you can actually use it. So why am I being told this? What are the actions I have to do? Has it been tested with other users? That's another part of it. So it's like easy to use. And then the key one, folks, the or is relevance. So FUR is the acronym. So FUR, I'm going to test you on that at the end. Yeah, in the standards, they have it the other way around. They put relevant first, which makes sense because you have to start with relevant, but it's hard to make an acronym out of starting with or like that. So FUR, I think, works. Yeah. Other recent developments, folks. So the ISO standard is great, and those four principles come from the ISO standard. But in the kind of Irish context, so the central bank released their consumer protection code from 2025, and this is kind of coming on stream with lots of financial institutions taking it very, very seriously. And if you see here, folks, like there's just black and white, financial organizations have to ensure that all information that it provides to a customer is clear, accurate, up to date, and written in plain English, avoiding the unnecessary use of technical terms. And yeah, so those are the key ones for us. And then the A also can be reasonably understood by the consumer. So A, B, and C. D being timely, and E bringing key information to the attention of the customer. So, key points there, and it's good to have them in, in the consumer protection code that the central bank are kind of backing. And then the European Accessibility Act, folks. So you might have heard a lot about this in terms of what it means for different organizations. But there's a key point, which is that clear and accessible information must be provided. And this is in it, and it talks about information must be, where possible or where needed, provided in multiple formats. Okay, so audio, text, or video, or easy to understand. Yeah, so those are the kind of ones we're focusing on for our work in plain language. So making sure information is easy to understand. Yeah. So, and then, yeah, those are some kind of high level recent developments. And then, like, I think it's just so inspiring when I see the work of other plain English champions folks across different organizations. So here's one that Adele Finan in Waterford and Wexford, who's the regional literacy coordinator, kind of put together. And we did lots of training with Waterford and Wexford, I think last year, and we had maybe like 7 or 8 people do training. And then Adele put together with the people who'd done the training, just like a flip book, a case study of how people were actually implementing it. And I'll send you links to that. But just really inspiring to see, when you ask people to get on board, how are they putting it into practice? People, they will do it because people just want their work to be better. They want to help their clients, and plain English is one way to do it. So yeah, shout out to Adele. Good stuff. Yeah, in terms of reference guides, folks, I have 5 minutes. Stay with me. In terms of reference guides, if I was to ask you to like just share a couple with your colleagues because people are so busy. They just need things they can actually use that are practical for them. I suggest everyone reads the Writing and Design Tips booklet from NALA. It's been updated. My colleague Claire, so well done, Claire and the team. And then our checklist, folks, just 20 points. There's a little bit of like language jargon in it in terms of active voice and passive voice and abstract nouns. But if you've been coming along to these sessions, folks, you've done training with me, or you read Writing Design Tips, they'll be explained. So if you read Writing Design Tips, it explains like the checklist, and it's just a good primer for your team. And yeah, so I think as a plain language champion, just have a knowledge of that, and then be able to talk about the checklist and talk about like language, structure, design points. And then for more comprehensive, queries, it's good to know where to go. So one place to go, folks, is the National Disability Authorities Toolkit, and that uses universal design approach, and it covers like the whole spectrum of things like writing communication, spoken and signed, digital communication. So there might be an answer to your question that's very particular in there. And then one guide I came across through Claire when she was doing an international course was this kind of open access guide for designers, and it's called A Practical Handbook on Accessible Graphic Design. And when you think about design, folks, I always think design can be a bit, very hard. Like it's because it's a real craft and a real skill. But from reading this, it kind of gives you the language you need if you're working with designers or if you're doing just kind of simple design. So I think it's a good thing to know, and it's yeah, I recommend it. Yeah, and covers all these different things in terms of design fundamentals, typography, digital media, physical media, resources. So yeah, it kind of gives you the practical things you need to know about in terms of design. Lovely. So folks, yeah, how much time do we have? 3 minutes. So the top 6 tips, folks, I'll do this really quickly, and then we might do just one or two things. So the first one is always like just have that empathy. Think of your readers. Think of how it's going to affect them, your content. Second one is use the active voice. Try to use we, try to use you, try to empower people as much as possible. Try to avoid formulations like um, applications must be sent by email. That's passive voice. Active voice, just apply by email or email to apply. Use everyday words. My mantra for this one, folks, is cut the fluff and explain the stuff. Explain the technical words and cut the unnecessary stuff. Keep sentences short. Use the inverted pyramid. Sounds complicated, folks, but it's not. It just means put the key message first, and then use white space headings and bullets. So, practical tips about being a champion, practical tips about sharing resources, and then it's just about like drilling these into people's kind of work, whether it's a press release, whether it's a web page, whether it's a letter, whether it's a poster, you just kind of, trying to get these as much as possible. And I think that kind of the 6 is a good number to hold on to that you can talk about. Yeah, so 2 minutes, folks. Let's keep going before heading over to Neil. So sample good practice. So in recent weeks, folks, I've been doing training sessions, all different sorts of organizations. And the great thing is you get to see lots of different content. So like in my sessions, I tried to do what we call crit sessions, which is where we just kind of sit around as a group and we talk about, okay, here's a poster, or here's a video, or here's a web page, and let's talk about what's strong, what can we improve. And usually I'd start with something that I thought could be improved a lot. But let's start with something I think is very, very strong. So I think this poster here, don't worry about the text on the right, but look at the image on the left, folks, and just tell me, I responded very strongly to this. But what is working in terms of that poster if you were scrolling on Instagram? Just what is so strong about that poster if that was your content? Put your answers in the chat. Yeah, the image is so positive, folks, isn't it? And then in terms of the texts, we just have a simple headline. Okay, it's in all caps, but it's short, but that's fine. We have a date. The date is kind of written in the plain English format. We have the number here, no THs. Then we have um, the month, and then we have Clay Castle Beach. And we have a little bit of design, folks, in terms of those white lines, just to kind of break it up. And yeah, the image, like, is that a real image or is that a stock image? Well, I mean, it's hard to know, but I think it looks like a real image. And it should just, for me, just shows accomplishment, shows authenticity. It shows something I want to be part of. It's like a real culture. It's a real thing. and then I can read on write for more detail, and the more detail there is kind of written in short paragraphs, and it's using some plain English techniques. But I just think the image there is just kind of creates that tone. And so much what we do is creating a tone that's warm and inviting in our writing. And I think that image just kind of, for me, encapsulates a lot, because I see a lot of stuff, folks. And if I just like look at this for a second, like this was something that a local authority in Ireland or in Dublin was using to promote one of their markets. And I found it on Reddit, and I was just like, people were giving out about the image. And like in contrast, like if that was a poster that you were seeing, folks, and that was the image that was being used, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? AI generated, yeah. And for me, it's just a stark contrast between, you know, the human and the real and things that are actually happening versus, just slapping this on a poster and calling it a day, you know? So what do we want to have? Do we want to have authentic, real, human-centered approach, or do we want to have something that's a bit, you know, where's that coming from? It's coming from nowhere, really, isn't it? Yeah, so that was just my little yeah. So in terms of what we're doing, folks, like a crit is just where like you might work on something, get together, and then you might ask questions and have feedback about what's strong and what's not strong, and that can be just a great way to build in plain language principles. Yeah, let's skip that, folks. We're out of time. Good. So that's it for me, folks, and I might come back to more questions and answers afterwards if anything resonated there. But I might hand over to Neil in the Bank of Ireland. And Neil is one of the key copywriters at Bank of Ireland. He's been working there for many years, kind of helped lead the team on a plain English journey. So I'm looking forward to hearing Neil's experiences and sharing them with us.
Thanks, Sean. And those are great tips, by the way. And the resources, I can really recommend the resources that you shared there.
Thanks, Neil.
I'm going to share my screen, so let's hope it works. Go to window. And can
There we
you
go.
see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I've been asked by Sean to talk about building a culture of plain English at Bank of Ireland. And from 2013 to 25 is a period I'm going to cover. The first thing I'm going to say is
Neil, can I stop you once? Neil, can I stop you 1 second? Can you make it full size? Is that possible? Can you make presentation mode?
Oh yeah, sorry. Slideshow. And how does that look?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to say is this is about what I'm going to talk about is progress, not perfection. We haven't got everything right, and every day what I do is review people's work and try and put it into plain English and work with them to help them understand that. So even if you've been spending, as I have, I've been at the bank now for 12 years, you still have lots of things that you can improve upon. So we're not perfect by any way, and we are still learning. And it's great to get feedback from people to learn more. The journey that we're on, it falls into 3 phases really: awareness, acceptance, and adoption. And that's really reflects how human beings take on new material and new concepts. I didn't know we were in an awareness phase when we started the awareness phase. I didn't know we were in an acceptance phase. I didn't know we were in the adoption phase. So it wasn't some master plan that I had in my mind when we started out. I think someone said life has to be lived forwards, but can only be understood backwards. So I have the privilege of being able to look back now and put it into groups. But I'm going to explain what happened in each phase, and it might help you on your journeys to plain English. So it is cultural change that we're talking about, and cultural change is quite hard. And a lot of the time when we think about plain English, we're thinking about people adopting technical skills, writing skills. And of course they have to, but actually changing the culture of the organization to let people use those writing skills is another journey in itself. So I'm going to explain how we did that, or how we're doing it rather. So the first thing that happens, you have to make a start somewhere. I'm going to start kind of egotistically about when I joined the bank, which was in 2013, when I was much younger. So in 2013, that was the first time they employed a full-time copywriter in a bank in Ireland, as far as I know. And the reason for that was that senior managers approved it. And I think Sean mentioned before getting senior managers on board and how important that is. And the reason that they got on board was that they'd seen communications, and that means letters, web pages, brochures, going out from the bank, which they felt weren't in plain English by any stretch of the imagination. But they were frustrated because they wanted to write in plain English to customers, but they couldn't see how they could do that. And so the first thing they did was, well, we'll get a full-time copywriter, someone who's skilled in doing it, and that can help us, and then we'll get to plain English. So that was the first step in the journey. The challenge was, of course, that we're massive in Irish terms. We have 10,000 employees. If we want to write to every customer in Ireland, it takes about 4 weeks to start the printing presses in Cabinteely until the last bit of print comes off the line. 4 weeks, and we have to stagger when we send stuff out because of the demands on the postal service. So we have a very, very wide range of products and services. In international terms, we're not a massive bank. We have however many customers we have, but it's not massive, but we do have a very wide range of products and services. So we sell anything from I have a current account and I have a credit card. You could have a mortgage, but you could also have a pension with New Ireland, because New Ireland's part of Bank of Ireland, have home insurance, have all sorts of products and services, including foreign currency and global markets. And what we have in each of those areas, we have experts writing to customers. And experts, their language is usually expert language. So it's a challenge for them to step down from the language they use between each other and other experts. And often the language is what they use to show they are an expert. So they have to then think, well, how can I best communicate this in everyday language? And of course, it was impossible to review. I was one person. We have 4 copywriters now. There was only one. It was impossible to review everything. So that was the challenge. So this is how I went about it. We already had senior management buy-in, so that was that. The first thing was to partner with an external authority, because that really has cued us inside an organization. So in the past, we've been partners with Plain English UK, we're lifetime members, and with NALA. And then once we had made partnerships in this way, you could go back to the bank and say, well, it's not just me who says, maybe you should rewrite this letter. I'm working on the principles set out by a respected body, an external body. And that has a big, well, in our case, it had a bigger effect on people in the organization. We then got a number of one-day, they were all face-to-face in those days, showing my age, one-day plain English training courses, and got the people who are most frequently communicating with customers to go and have a one-day training course. Now, it doesn't make them into expert writers, but what I realized after a while is they at least have the ideas and they understand and have an awareness of plain English. And that makes it easier to make changes. So even if it doesn't transform people, it makes a big difference. And you have a common language to chat about with them. I launched an editing service. When I say an editing service, that's me. So I was asking anyone to send me anything they were sending to customers, and I would edit it, in brackets, rewrite it a lot of the time. And I would explain to them why I'd made those changes. And we then had independent before and after testing. We were lucky enough, I was in the marketing department, so I could use the market research people, Red Sea. And I got a before and an after for 5 or 6 documents, letters, brochures, web pages, and got customers to look at them and to rate them. And luckily enough, they loved the after ones. So I was able then to go back to people and say, yes, I know you like the way you've written that letter because you've written it that way for years, but the customers prefer it this way. And it's customers that we want to communicate with, not you. So that made a big impact as well. So just having 1 or 2 test results, and it doesn't have to be anything hugely professional, just showing people's befores and afters makes a massive difference. We then got a first Plain English UK award crystal marks. Plain language organizations do this. And we got our first crystal mark for I can't even remember what it was on. It was one of our brochures, which means that they had read it, edited it, and checked our wording and approved it. And that also had a huge impact internally. So what were the results of all that work? Well, the results was we raised the whole awareness of plain English across the group. I don't think many people were talking about plain English or knew what it was across the group at the time. Some people did, of course. Some people were very good writers. And that leads on to the second. We found our plain English champions in-house. There were people out there who would, for years had written really good stuff, but they were not in the majority. But they were felt isolated, and we were able to say, well, now you're part of a movement within the organization for plain English. And they were great because they would offer the most documents to be reviewed, and they would encourage people to send stuff to me, which is what the service was at the beginning of the copywriting service. And we got external accreditation from Plain English for hundreds of our documents. So those were our major achievements. So at this stage, the group of the bank realized what Plain English was. There were champions in-house, and we've got some external thumbs up. But what was the resistance? Because we are a large organization, to change things, human beings don't always welcome change, as you know. So one of the things that I found, and if you're in an organization, I think it would be likely you'd find the same thing, is if you need to send something to a copywriter, someone like me, that's going to take time. It's another loop that you have to go through, and no one likes being told that they're wrong. No one wants to see the experience of being told, yes, that's actually badly written. So people, didn't have to send stuff to me. So if they didn't want to, they wouldn't. And you do get a bit of resistance to doing it because it does take more time out of their day. We tend to make big changes as copywriters, so that also adds to the time. And our risk colleagues and legal colleagues were also anxious that if we change the piece of language, it might change the meaning. And changing the meaning might mean that it was not legally valid anymore. So we had to spend a lot of time with them as key partners saying, yes, we will change the wording, but no, we won't change the meaning. And they just needed time to feel comfortable with that. The other thing that I found was, of course, it was such a big process. I didn't have the time to go back and check that the version that I'd edited was the version that actually went out of the building to a customer. So we just didn't have the resources to do with the 10,000 people in the organization to make sure that people were actually taking what we'd done and using it. This is all about cultural change. It's not just about learning technical skills. Okay, so that was the first phase, which was awareness. Second phase that we went into, I'm just making up the dates. I think it was around 2016, but don't hold me to it. 2020, I do remember, obviously, because of COVID. So the acceptance phase was, we got more copywriters employed. You only get more people, full-time people, if something's working in a bank. So we knew that we were doing something right. We were able to edit more writing and gradually change what was going on. But we realized that we couldn't actually do everything. Even with 3 or 4 of us, we couldn't look at everything. So we focused on the areas we wanted to make the change most, and that was focused on vulnerable customers, people who were being particularly stressed by a situation or an event, and how the support we personally wanted to give to them as copywriters. And so we thought that that was the best area where we could make the most difference. And that's why I come in. I mean, I know banks are not always the most popular organizations, but the reason I do it is to make it so that in a stressful time, it's written in simpler language so you're not worrying and wondering what it means. So for example, we had a unit in-house called the Deceased Customer Unit. And why was it called that? It was called that because when a customer of ours dies, we have to make sure that we stop their accounts, and there's a whole legal process behind that. And they came to us and asked us to review their work, but we did review their work, and review the letters and the forms that people have to fill in. Because the naming of the units, as one of my colleagues had just gone through a bereavement at the time, was very painful for people to write to. No one wants to write to someone called the deceased customer unit, particularly if they're an elderly, usually elderly woman, wanting to find out about their husband's accounts. So we got them to change. We suggested that they change their name to the bereavement support unit, and that was a much more was better reflective of what they actually did. But that was a good example of us using internal language and projecting it outwards, which didn't work for customers. We were able to make those changes, and I think we were very pleased with that. What also happened in this phase was the external environment, and Sean mentioned the ISO standards. That was more recent, but the central bank were reading and looking into a number of issues and always coming back and advocating that we use plain English. So people were coming back into the bank and saying, I've just been to the central bank. One of the things they told us about this issue was we could have written this better in plain English. So there was a feedback loop coming back to us, supportive of our efforts. And we also had risk and legal, who became very close partners of ours. They weren't at the start because they were anxious about what we would do. But as soon as they saw, they had some examples of what we were able to do, they were under pressure as well to make sure that they were writing in plain English, maybe something more we'll talk about later. They became very close partners, and to this day, the risk and legal teams are very close partners of ours, and will allow us to edit things first when we're looking at a key communication, and then make their comments based on the language that we've used. So that was an acceptance phase, and I wish it was as neat and fell into these three phases, but I'm just going to summarize it and say that it did. The last phase I'll talk about was adoption. That was from 2020 onwards. And suddenly, after about 7 years, everything seemed to accelerate from 2020 onwards. I wrote a style guide for the organization. The style guide is just a collection of all the rules about language. I know that Sean talks about this, that we think should be adopted by the bank. So, for instance, the date format, which Sean mentioned earlier, we would have people writing dates in all different ways. It's a tiny thing, but no one wants to see a letter several different ways of using the date or writing the time. We use the 12-hour clock, not the 24-hour clock. It's much wider understood. 1725 sounds like a time when the French Revolution was being thought about, not 5:30 at night. So Style Guide, we wrote, it's widely adopted inside the bank, and it's now there as one source of truth. So people defer to that now. It has become a rule book for us. We had the European Accessibility Act was passed in June this year, and that pushes organizations to make all of their services more accessible. So you may have seen that we have touchscreen ATMs going out with feedback loop with a jack for audio as well. But in terms of our writing, we now use Microsoft Editor and document stats to check the reading use score, and we aim for one above 60. That's something that you can easily do. You just use Word, go to Review, Editor, Document Stats, and check what the score is at the bottom. And that should be understandable for 13 to 15-year-olds. We also have the Consumer Protection Code coming, which mentions plain English for the first time. And again, another part of that great feedback loop, the external environment is telling us plain English is what people want and governments want. We also have we're lucky to have internal testing now, which brings in external customers for every major piece of communications that we're doing. And we can get those customer reviews and get them back before we submit anything to customers. Not for everything, but for key things. And then we get what people are finding difficult to understand, what people are finding easy to understand. And that's a fantastic resource that we have. So copywriting reviews have now become almost mandatory. We don't say they're mandatory, but because so many people use us now, it's become just a way of working, and that for me is cultural change. So I'll just reiterate that it is progress, not perfection. I hate it when people say we're on a journey, but we are on a journey. And we're really just taking things one word at a time. I'm sure we can improve in many, many areas. But that's the history so far. Thanks,
Lovely.
Sean.
Thank you, Neil. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So much in it. Yeah, I mean, Neil is gonna stick around. But if there's any questions,
Yeah.
just while they're in your mind, folks, you can put them in the chat now, or you can keep them until later. Yeah, but I think those three categories are very, very helpful, even if a little bit of a poetic license, or maybe a little bit of like a big picture. I think awareness, acceptance, adoption, and we like a bit of alliteration, don't we? Lovely. So thank you, Neil. That's very helpful. Yeah, so now we're gonna go, folks, and we're gonna have a chat with Maura in the court service. Maura is the head of comms, and probably I was chatting to Maura, and probably one of the busiest people I've ever met. So there's lots to be across, I'd say, in the court service. So I have a couple of questions here, folks, that I'm gonna go through, but I'm gonna try to relate it to Neil's presentation and things we've come up with. But there's one thing that's going on in the court service that is very impactful, and is kind of, I think, one of the shining lights of the Irish public service, and that's kind of the modernization program. So, Maura, can you tell us a little bit about the court service modernization program, and where does plain language come into it?
Thanks a million, Sean, and thanks for being here today, and for your top tips at the top of the presentation, and for Neil's presentation as well. I think, like, we are all learning, and I think we can all learn from one another. I know Neil doesn't like the phrase "we're on a journey," but in terms of modernization program in the court service, we are. So just to give you a quick, brief background of what we do, the court service is mandated to provide, first of all, support services to the judiciary, who are the third arm of government and independent. But we are a public civil service body. We are also mandated to provide information to the public on the courts and how the courts run. We also do all the administration, so all of the filing and the paperwork and the back office work that supports courts. And the non-court legal work as well. We do all of that, and we are the registrars that sit in courtrooms with the judges, and we also then look after the estate, which is a big job. We're nationwide, courthouses all over the country, and I think the average age of our buildings is about 163 years. So that's a big job. So we had an organizational capability review about in 2017, and they, looking at it, government decided, as did the court service, that we really needed to modernise. And looking across the industry in particular, the justice sector, quite a traditional industry, and it was recognised that that needed to modernise as well. And the court service was one way to start the ball rolling. So really, the modernization program, what we set out from the beginning, it's a long-term vision. It's a 10-year program from 2020 to 2030. And the first thing we wanted to do was put the user at the center. And we also wanted to look at digitizing a lot of that paperwork that I mentioned earlier. So it's digital first, but not digital only, because that's what it has to be if you're going to put the user at the center. And I think that user-centered approach was a gift in terms of plain language, because you can't genuinely say you are trying to be user-centric if you're not going to embrace plain language. So when I joined the court service 5 years ago, at the kind of the beginning of the modernization program, I was very familiar with plain language. I had been running the National Pensions Awareness Campaign for the Department of Social Protection out of the Pensions Authority for about 7 years previous to that. And previous previous to it, again, I had been leading out on the communications for the transposition of an EU directive on e-invoicing. So two extremely technical, pension technical, heavy jargon information, and like Neil referred to, very financially technical information around e-invoicing and then IT itself. So I was very much I embraced plain language in all of my work, the sort of the previous 10 years. And then I came into the court service and I realized we had a big job to do. And the modernization program gave us the vehicle to do that, as I said, because how can you be user-centric if you don't have a plain language policy? And I think one of the first things that I did when I joined was to develop out our style guide. And in doing that, one of the first things that we did was to put the universal toolkit. Really, we embedded that into the style guide, and that was kind of the start of the journey. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Maura. It's great to know about the work the court service does, and yeah, like the journey you're on. Like, so it's 20. You said 2020 to 2030. So you're kind of, I mean, it's almost midway, isn't it? Really, exactly almost midway.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, yeah, like the question was like halfway through. Like, what are some of the big learnings you had, like yourself, or as the court service? Like, what are some learnings you'd like to share, or is there anything that jumps to mind?
Yeah, so I think we have Court Strategy is a massive website. It's really big. We have the legal diary in there, and it does a number of different things. It supports legal practitioners, gives them the information they need, but it also gives court users the information they need. So we're like straddling a lot of different types of users who have different understanding of the law. So the first thing that we did was we looked at family law, and a team looked at all the information that we had on family law, our family law reform team, and revised it. And they took a plain language view of it, but also a user-centered view. So they applied service design, which is where you look to your service users, you look to their needs, and you develop back from there. So they redeveloped just that section of the website, and that got great traction. The response from, we would work with a lot of support organizations, so Women's Aid, Men's Aid, Victim Support at Courts, VSAC, all of the different support organizations and NGOs that provide support to people going through the court process. We work alongside them, and they really informed, and their users really informed the development of that information. So if we were to take the whole of the website, it's actually taken us 5 years to take a plain language approach to the whole of the website. So we took it. What I'm saying is, what I learned is, don't be afraid to take one section at a time, because it can seem like overwhelming to do everything. And I think, as Eckhart Tolle said, just one step at a time, echoing, I think, what Neil has said. But the other thing that I think we've learned as well is the power of talking to users. So we have a civic society forum that all of the members, all of those representative organizations and NGOs are on. And anytime we develop something, we take it back to them now and get feedback on it. We did it recently around Let's Be Respectful policy that we're introducing for our staff and our court users. And just things around words that trigger people. We work closely with the traveling community. I notice Teresa, who's on the call, I know she works on I can see she works on a traveler program. Really interesting to hear things like words like banned and barred are triggering words for that community. So please don't use them in our communications. So I suppose it's just interesting to picking up on your point about accessibility, about we do trauma-informed practice, and learning and applying that to language and applying it to plain language to, go even deeper. So the power of testing your work with users, can't underestimate it, and the feedback that you get back is terrific.
Thanks, Maura. Yeah, such great insight there. Very practical things and big things, and Yeah, so I mean, you were talking about starting small and building, and it will make an impact. And power talking to users. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but something my mom always says is, "How do you eat an elephant?" Well, you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. I'm not advocating for eating elephants, folks, just in case. But there we go. Yeah. So yeah, I think like so the next question I have was like, what's the impact been for service users? So just like the family law pages, I think are a great example. So if anyone hasn't had a look at them, folks, if you look at the family law pages, but like, and you're getting feedback from users, but like, how can you say anything about the impact on when I say users, I mean like your clients or people who are using the courts. What's been the impact on them, on your service users?
Okay, so a really good example is we took a plain language approach to our family law forms as well. We launched that project the end of early this year. And again, a lot of testing, a lot of work with teams on the ground, something that they were not used to. And when we brought back the forms and we're about to go live with them, we did one last test with again Women's Aid, Men's Aid, and just to see the response from them and users that like unbelievably that they
Hmm.
can fill out forms that are accessible and in plain language themselves without having to maybe go to Men's Aid or Women's Aid or get support from somebody else, that it's in plain language, that they can fill in the forms and actually come into the office with the forms filled out. It makes the process so much quicker for them and for our staff. So, like, I mean, we've people coming in with tears in their eyes going, "Oh my God, for the first time ever, I've been able to fill out this
Oh wow.
form on my own." And it just makes it easier for people. So I think we're noticing about 40% now are able to fill out the forms on their own. Which if you can imagine coming into Dolphin House in Dublin, and trying to, maybe get a barring order or, something
Mm.
extremely emotional and traumatic maybe has happened in your life, and you've got to fill out a damn form and you can't
Yeah.
make any sense of it. It's just adding to somebody's stress and somebody's burden. So that has made a real impact on users. And I think we've had the same experience with the family law pages. What's great from a stats perspective is to see the reduction in the bounce rate of some of our pages. Some of our pages had an average bounce rate of 90%. So that's where somebody comes on and leaves within, I think, between 4 to 5 seconds. So they're not getting in for any information. On the pages that we have made accessible and taken a plain language approach, we are now seeing people stay on the pages for between 50 seconds and 70 seconds, and the industry standard is a minute. So it means they're getting the information that they need. And they're staying on the page long enough to get that information. And then we can see that they're going on through the stepper onto other sections. So that's us just doing our job, really, but it's great to see it.
Yeah, that's very insightful about the bounce rates. And I I use in training sessions as an example the family law pages, the family law forums as like, oh, here's something that's using the plain English guidelines in practice. What do we think? And also the videos that you have put together, I think they're another great way to
Yeah.
just make things more accessible.
And Sean, you've no idea how hard that was.
Okay.
When people see a lot of white space, they go, "Oh, that looks like a child has done it."
Okay.
And judiciary maybe and staff that have been used to seeing forms in a
Mm.
particular way for years. So I'm not underestimating the challenge that we had, but the results are worth it without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, it's like that resistance that Neil talked about, and like in the legal world, because it's based on precedent, it's based on like language and knowledge. And I think one of the things that Neil said was very insightful. He said that experts show that they're experts through their language, and like that might be use a technical language. But what I'd try to reposition you or help plain English champions to do is try to see like you show your knowledge through your expertise, which is explaining things that are very complicated in simple language rather than showing off all the words that you know. And I think that the family law pages do that very, very well. Yeah, so I mean, I suppose it's a bit of a bit of a challenge. So like we have like Neil here, and maybe Neil can answer this in a little bit as well, and yourself. But like, from the Court Service Bank of Ireland, like your big organizations and people here may not be have the resources, may not have the bureaucracy that maybe you have to go through as well sometimes. But like, what would be like your advice for someone who's just getting started, like in maybe a smaller organization? Any top tips more?
I think as you said, start with senior management, but try and do the training together. I think that was the most powerful thing that we did. So our senior management team, we did the training together, the NALA training, and there's something very powerful about using your own materials. So it's very great. It's great theoretical when you bring up somebody who's done it incorrectly, and you go, or could have used more plain language, and you correct that. But then when you take something that your team has either signed off on or produced, and you ask them to rewrite even a paragraph, it's very powerful. But it also gives you the opportunity to keep that dialogue open. So now we find in meetings, and being the plain language champion, it does fall on me, but I feel like I have the power now to say to them, okay, guys, remember our plain language learning? This document could be better. Lots of long sentences here, or whatever. So by doing the training together as a team, we were able to bring it into our everyday jobs and the work that we're doing. So it doesn't matter how big, small, or indifferent your team or your organization is. That's where I'd start. And then if you have a comms team, or if you've, like Neil was saying, team that's creating a lot of content, bring them together and do the training with them, because that'll roll into your everyday.
Yeah.
Great.
That's my big tip.
I would
Neil,
say, yeah, I would say, echoing what you said, Maura, before in your talk, was find the most stressful situations for for us, it's customers or clients or the people you're helping. Find those most stressful points, the most painful points for them, and then look how you communicate to them at that point. And take a form. And we took the things like the standard financial assessment form, which people have to fill in to prove what their earnings are and what they're spending on, or things like bereavement or when they're in debt. Take those and then take one of those and rewrite it, and then show the difference it makes, and show it to customers, and get those customers to tell your senior management, but more importantly, your peers, what a difference it makes to be respected by putting something in plain language and treating people like human beings. And I think that's the emotional things. I do get emotional when I talk about the emotional things, are the most powerful things.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I think sometimes when we work in big organizations, like because it's your work and become something you do every day, you become a bit just habitual to it. Just becomes normal, and then it's like just keeping the fact that like a person who's coming to the family law, like this is the most stressful thing that's ever might be the most stressful thing that's ever going to happen in their lives, and it might be just a Tuesday to you, but how can you like make sure that empathy is just is there in your work? And I think plain language it's like aligned with service design and user centric, and it's just a way to do it. Or help to it. Lovely. So thank you so much, Maura, and thank you so much, Neil. I'm just gonna move towards the end, folks, for a second. So yeah, if there's any questions and answers, please put them in the chats. I see there's a couple there, but let me just wrap things up, folks, and then we'll do the questions and answers. So yeah, just to give shameless plugs, folks. If you're interested in staying in touch with us, please do join the Plain English Network, and then you'll see webinars like this and other things. And I'll send you a link to it. But just Google Plain English Network LinkedIn, you'll find it. We're also having these webinars in a few weeks in November. My colleague Derv is leading on them, so they're just webinars. Maybe Derv, do you want to jump in and talk about them?
Yeah, 10 seconds. So it's a series of 4 webinars. They're 1 hour each on Fridays, and they are all focused really on people working in community on the ground. So really targeting community and voluntary sector workers and volunteers, but of course everybody's welcome to join us. And we have a special kind of focus on learning in recovery. So people who are in recovery maybe for various addictions, and how important learning and literacy development is at that time in people's lives. So everyone's very welcome to join. You can click on the link there and you'll get individual registration links for the 4 events.
Thank you so much, Derv. It's going to be a great series of events. And they're all free, folks. It's just feel free to join. More shameless plugs. If you like what we did here, folks, there's a plain English training session. And say you're a champion and you're feeling a bit inspired and you think, oh, where do I go from here? Well, we have a training online. It's 3 hours. And the idea is like we make it really, really practical. You know, we do really practical editing exercises and reviewing exercises, and there's a bit of mentoring as well. So after training, you can send a document on to me, and then I'll give you plain English feedback beforehand and after. So the idea is send me samples before, we'll review them, and then work on something after the training, and you send it back to me, and then we'll do a bit of mentoring on it. So yeah, that's on 12th of November. It's not too far away, folks. And then we also have another free plain English webinar like this about writing effective letters and emails, and that's on 21st of November. A similar thing, send in samples, and then we'll review them for an hour on Friday, the 21st of November. If you're interested, folks, in learning more about NALA, you can go to nala.ie, or you can go to our Learn with NALA web platform. So we have lots of courses on there about understanding adult literacy, numeracy, digital literacy, becoming literacy friendly. So there's great stuff there. Yeah, so we'll go back to questions and answers, folks. If you have to head off, it's been a pleasure. If any of our speakers have to head off, actually stick around, speakers, please, for 5 minutes, if you can. Thank you. So there was a couple of questions there. Might be, let's see. So Suzanne Nolan asks, what's the minimum time frame we involved in the management team doing the training more mentioned or NALA training? Yeah, so just to answer that really quickly, from NALA. So like senior management can be so busy that I think any interaction you can get with them for an external like trainer like myself to come in is good. So like if it's half an hour, I'll do that. If it's an hour, I'll do that. With Mora and the planning and the court
Great
service,
service.
like we did like the full regular plain English champion training, and that was quite inspiring because yeah, I mean I'm talking to senior management, so I'm a little bit intimidated, but it's kind of my job to challenge them a little bit and show things, and so it was really good. And to be honest, you don't get senior management teams doing a lot of that on like so the court service buying into it and doing like a whole plain English champion training, which is 2.5 hours, then a task in between the 2.5 hours was a big commitment, and but it kind of paid off more. Do you think?
Oh yeah, 100%. So it was 2 half days, wasn't it, Sean?
2 half days, yeah.
Yeah, and that worked really well. I would advise doing it that way, where you do a half day and then you take a few days in between. People go off and think about it. They look at maybe some of their own content and then they come back and we did another half day. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a big time commitment for anyone, but you can like for that's kind of Nala's kind of training model, and we can do it like over a week, Tuesday and Thursday, over separate weeks like Friday and a Friday, or over like a month. So you do like 1 month now and then come back in a while. So it depends on what works. Any other questions, folks? There was a question about PowerPoint tips. So do we have Nala PowerPoint tips? I think we'd probably look to the National Disability Authorities Communications Toolkit and their kind of PowerPoint tips. But they're very similar to, designing, um, accessible documents. So you just make sure that there's like a brief table of contents. You make sure that if you're using images, if you're going to send it afterwards, make sure the images have all text, and making sure you're following like just good visual design. So I'll send you afterwards just the NDA's section about making good PowerPoints. Hopefully that helps.
So, and I
And
think Teresa has her hand up there, does she?
yeah.
Can you see that?
Teresa, do you have a question or is that from before? Feel free to unmute, Teresa. Can I give you the power to unmute? I can, Teresa, if you want to ask a question. Allow Mike if you want to ask a question, Teresa. Yeah, and Claire, my colleague Claire has put in that ahead has tips and PowerPoint slides. So I'll put that together and put it in the email for you folks. Any other questions? Is there any other questions, folks? Just raise your hands. I mean, I'm going to throw in one question. So like about resistance and say, I think more you talked about it already, but was there any kind of times when like resistance was a big thing and you were thinking, God, I have a big challenge in my hand here?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was accused of dumbing down the whole of the legal community.
Yeah.
Um, So I think your answer was really good, Sean, in terms of it's not a case of dumbing down, it's a case of explaining and doing it in a way in plain language to empower people to make better decisions for themselves, which is at
Great.
the heart of really the modernization program and the provision of information across the court service. I think there was a fear as well that people might think we're giving advice if we use plain language. That's not true either. It's about, again, like I said, just giving people the information in a language that they can understand so that they can participate better, ask better questions, to help them make more informed decisions. Really, that's all it's about.
Yeah, thanks, Maura. Anything on resistance from you, Neil, and dealing with it?
Well, I've been editing stuff this morning before this presentation. I'm used to having a fight every week.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone has their own opinions. Everyone remembers their English teacher from when they were 10 or 11 who told them not to do this or not do that. And they kind of stick with that for the rest of their lives.
Really.
So, it becomes a bit of a shock that the bank actually has decided that you should write this way. And also that it still comes as a bit of a shock. We're a very large organization. To some people have never come across this before, and
Yeah.
they've been writing in this sort of I don't think there's ever a training course you go on when you join a large organization, but you tend to use this language, this bureaucratic language, because you think that's the right thing to do. It's the right way to speak. And it always comes as a bit of a shock when you realize it's a lot simpler than that. And you just have to write to people and thinking that you're writing to your children, your mother, your sister, your brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that there's that empathy. Yeah, and we have a question from the CEO of at Silver Arch. Feel free to. I'm gonna unmute. I give you the power to unmute, and if you want to ask the question, just feel free to unmute there and ask it, please.
Yeah, so sorry, it's Maeve Gordon
Hi,
here.
Maeve.
Thanks a million. It was great to listen to all the tips in such a tight piece of time. But my question would be, do you have any learning with regard to supporting people across different sections within an organization, different tiers, like from senior management down to, I suppose, people who might team lead, down to the direct workers, grassroots ground, where resources are limited and people's roles are so diverse and varied, but at the same time there's a real awareness to the need for plain English, because many of the stumbling blocks we face is because we're probably not communicating strongly or clearly enough. So how do you support staff to be empowered when they may not be in a position of power in their role naturally, but maybe very involved in that design and communication piece, and with the limitations of, the roles can't expand to meet all the demands?
Thanks, Maeve. That's a excellent question. It's quite a hard question. I'll answer, and then if more and Neil jump in. Like if you asked me that, and what would I suggest? I would suggest like if you wanted to get Nala in for just even a 1 hour introduction to plain language, you can contact me and we'll do it, and we'll tailor it for your organization, and we'll show like before and afters, and we'll very similar to this, we'll just show the impact of it, and we'll tailor it for your organization. And then if there was impetus coming from that or momentum, I would do like a big webinar or a big training session where it's like the top tips, and that can be like an hour, that can be 2.5 hours, and that can be that can be for big. So it's like 1 hour for everyone, and then like top tips for people who are more interested. And then I would do plain English champion training. So you're identifying the people who are like really interested in it and invested in it. So I think just to start incremental and get people talking about it and get people seeing the power of it. And there's different plain English trainings we can do. So that's how I would, if you ask me if you wanted Nala's help, what I would suggest to do. And then the other tips we've mentioned in terms of just before and afters and getting if you can point to something where there's kind of a particularly shockingly bad example of it, it's a policy or a template or a letter, and just getting people looking at that and saying, do we want to be party to this? Do we think this is acceptable? How can we improve it? That can be hard because you're challenging people, and the people are very embedded in what they've been doing for a long time, and people just want to do their job and finish. But I think you have to kind of sometimes challenge people in a very kind of welcoming way, or get them on board. That's what I would try to do through the training sessions I've just mentioned. Any thoughts from Maura or Neil?
I think so our style guide, having it in the style guide, and then getting your senior management team to endorse the style guide as a policy, and then making that available to everybody. I think that helped because everybody can access that. We developed a plain language module with NALA, which is specifically for the court service for our organisation and the industry that we work in. So that has been really powerful because everybody can access that. Also, our plain language champions are our communications officers. We have a network of them, and they're across all grades, right across the organisation. And we tend to send stuff out to them to say, give us back some plain language feedback on it. They tested the module as well for us. So it's trying to engage it at every level. You're right, Maeve. It's a real challenge. But that's how we've gone about it.
Thanks, Maura.
What I found is that the challenges often come from the middle. So people at the ground level are quite happy to adopt some of the changes, and the senior managers are. The difficulty comes in the middle. And for our organisation, and just talking really about our organisation, was the key relationships with legal and risk. So we're a very regulated organisation. So when people like our legal team and our risk team came on board and worked with us, we're now very tight as a team. So if they see something and it hasn't been reviewed by me or one of the copywriters, they will refer it to us. If I see something, I will refer it to them. And just partnering with the let's be honest, the most powerful people in the organization, because everything has to be reviewed by them, that makes a huge difference. It's just a way of playing the corporate way and working with it.
Thanks, Neil. So Maeve, hope that was helpful. So,
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was really helpful. Really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Maeve. Lovely. And my colleague Claire put in some great points in the chat. Claire, do you want to pop in for a second?
Yeah, and thank you, Sean. Yeah, it is tough move trying to get support and do a project that works when there are few resources or resistance. And I think that use the carrot and the stick approach works very well. So it's just start on something really small, a very small, short document that's causing a problem. Fix it. Show that you fixed it, even if it takes you a long time to do it. And do like as Sean showed at the beginning, a document from Edel about the benefits of fixing that document in financial terms and customer satisfaction terms. Management and others will jump on board when there's a success story, and it doesn't have to be big. So success, make it work and take your time and do it well, and drop names. So and so another company like yours also uses plain English guidelines. I think that's my tip.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Claire. Perfect. So if there's any final questions, folks, I'll put them in the chat, or feel free to put your hand up. Otherwise, I'll just thank our two excellent speakers. Thank you, Neil, so much. Thank you, Maura, so much. Just so delighted that you're here, and yeah, really great insights into how you're doing it. And yeah, and like you said, it's a journey. So we're all on it together, and we're about making things better as much as possible. Lovely. So I'm going to bring things to an end, folks. Thank you so much. Thanks to Derv. Thanks to Claire. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to you for coming, and hopefully see you on some of our webinars in the future.
Thank you very
much. Thanks very much. Thanks, guys. Have a good Friday. Bye.
Have a good
Happy
Friday.
Friday.
Lovely. So I'll wait for people to leave, folks, and then for the recording, I have to make sure everyone leaves, otherwise it records. It's nice if you could 3-hour recording. Some people say in here they like hanging out in here, but I will.
It's funny how some people still in on the end of a meeting.
Yeah.
All right, Sean, Claire, I'll say goodbye. Derv, say goodbye.
Thanks, Neil. So
Bye-bye.
thankful. Thank you. Lovely. Okay, folks. I'm gonna just can I remove people? Just remove people if that's okay. Lovely. I'll give you a quick call, Derv, if you have 5 minutes, just have a chat. Is that okay? Okay, and end the event. Thanks, everyone.